introduce at the appropriate time. As a reminder, the Q&A session, this is a Zoom webinar format where audio and video will be available only to the panelists. However, at any time during the event, you can type in your question by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Please do indicate to whom your question is addressed. Sunita, my colleague, will sort through the questions after Ghazala is done with her presentation, and she will moderate the Q&A session. Depending upon your level of interest in participating in the Q&A, this event could last anywhere from 90 minutes to 120 minutes. But we are also pleased to bring you remarks from our advisory board member, Professor Raj Mohan Gandhi, sometime during the Q&A session. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Anand Patwardhan, who needs no introduction to an Indian audience. But for others, he is a well-known documentary filmmaker, much of whose work has focused on the rise of religious fundamentalism in India and the steady erosion of our foundational values of secular democracy. Though many of his films have won national and international acclaim, they have often faced both state censorship as well as right-wing attacks. His seminal work, Ram Ke Naam, In the Name of God, was filmed after the demolition of the ancient Babri Masjid in Ayodhya in 1992. That film has become a must-watch film even today, as the Hindu nationalist project of building a temple over the destroyed mosque has begun in earnest in an air of triumphalism legitimized by an ill-conceived Supreme Court judgment. It's my pleasure now to introduce the remarks from Anand Patwardhan. Give me a second to share the screen.
Thank you for inviting me here today. The only worry I have in this pandemic of webinars is that we mostly end up speaking to the like-minded. I hope that is not the case today and we reach out beyond the confines of those who have already cherished the values of plurality enshrined in the Indian Constitution. In speaking on a forum of Hindus for human rights, let me start by saying that I've never identified myself as a Hindu, except when I needed to challenge Hindutva fanatics or those who take pride in the mere biological location of their birth. Born 3 years after independence, even as a child, my identity as a human being was far more persuasive than any other identity. For this, I must thank my family of socialist freedom fighters, almost all of whom spent a varying number of years in British jails. As I grew older, awareness of my caste and class privilege became an acute source of guilt, which in turn translated into my drifting first into social work and then into documentary filmmaking. For the last 2.5 decades, most of my films have attempted to warn the people of my country against the rising tide of upper caste-led majoritarianism. I generally don't agree with identity politics, with the exception of oppressed communities that need to temporarily use it to identify and fight their oppressors, as blacks fight racism in USA, or Dalits and Adivasis fight casteism in India, or women fight gender oppression everywhere. But beyond a point, even the identity politics of the oppressed, if it remains exclusivist, can create a barrier that denies possibilities of a larger solidarity movement leading to change. So the contributions of white people who were killed as they fought shoulder to shoulder with their black brothers and sisters during the civil rights movement in America, or the upper caste supporters of Dr. Ambedkar, should not be forgotten. On the other hand, identity politics, when used by privileged sections of society, is generally dangerous, as can be seen when Brahmins or Kshatriyas or white supremacists form their own exclusivist groups. Yet today I recognize that a body like Hindus for Human Rights is responding to a felt need to prevent the cynical hijacking of Hindu identity by a band of upper caste led hate mongers. This is already a contentious thing to say. Almost a century ago, Dr. Ambedkar rightly pointed out that Brahminical caste oppression is embedded in the most influential of Hindu sacred texts, making the exercise of internal reform a virtual impossibility. Reform has, of course, been attempted over the centuries, from the Buddha and Mahavir through Kabir and Guru Nanak to the present day. Mahatma Gandhi, for his part, believed that universal values of peace and justice are to be found in every religion. The Hinduism he personally practiced in the form of ahimsa, or non-violence, was rooted in the offshoots of the Bhakti Sufi tradition and was as radically different from caste-driven Hindu Sanatan Dharma as the New Testament of Jesus is from the Torah, where an eye for an eye prevails. It is actually uncanny that starting at almost opposite ends of the caste hierarchy, both Ambedkar and Gandhi arrived at the same path of ahimsa. And perhaps for the practical reason that the people of India were steeped in religion, both took refuge in the idiom of religion, one in a reformed version of Buddhism and the other in a reformed version of Hinduism. Both endowed their idea of religion with their own ethical values. I'm not equating the two religions because Buddhism is intrinsically more egalitarian than Hinduism. Apart from being casteless, it does not even entertain the idea of an all knowing, all powerful God, let alone a multiplicity of gods and goddesses whom their followers can try to bribe through prayer and donations. Gandhi inherited his Hinduism, but slowly and surely became an ardent reformist. Ambedkar discarded his birth religion and chose Buddhism as the vehicle to liberate his people from the slavery imposed by Hinduism. Instrumentalizing religion was key to both. Ambedkar emphasized rationality as the quality he most admired in his new religion and discarded the irrational idea of reincarnation that many Buddhists still adhere to. Elsewhere, I've written describing Ambedkar and Gandhi as liberation theologists in the same vein that left wing Latin American Christians turned to Jesus Christ as a revolutionary sent to liberate the masses from injustice and slavery. Yet religion outlasts reformists. Brahminical Hindutva in India, heaping atrocities on minorities and the poor, can be blamed on a caste system that is thousands of years old. That today Buddhists in Myanmar and Sri Lanka are also guilty of atrocities only shows that no religion is safe when power gets concentrated in the hands of a small ruling elite. Religion by itself is not always the main reason for the spreading of hate and violence. Nationalism and the geopolitical designs of powerful nations are equally responsible. To examine the trajectory of the religious poison we see today, we have to go back in time and beyond present day borders. It's fairly well documented that the idea of Islamic jihad had dissipated in the Middle Ages by the end of the Crusades and was revived for altogether non religious reasons, first by British colonialists who ruled the Indian subcontinent by pitting Hindus against Muslims, and then by a USA Saudi Israeli coalition that used it to gain a foothold in oil rich parts of the globe, and later to fight a proxy war against the Soviet Union. Al Qaeda and ISIS and their many offshoots are their long lasting gift to the globe. The role of superpowers in creating and sustaining Hindutva terror in the subcontinent is less well understood. The British crushed India's first war of independence in 1857 by openly fanning communal discord at a time when Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs had joined the rebel forces. Delhi had been captured by the rebels, and as the British lay a desperate siege of the city from its outskirts, its troops were demoralized. The documents on record are mere the documents on record are mainly internal letters exchanged between the British forces and their well-paid, trustworthy Indian spies, both Hindu and Muslim, that show how close the British army was to total disarray. And yet, with the odds completely against them, the British prevailed because of the betrayals they successfully induced, just as they had done 100 years earlier at the Battle of Plassey, which first gave them a foothold in India. From here to spreading the rumor that Mughal Emperor Babur had destroyed a temple marking the birthplace of the Hindu god Lord Ram at Ayodhya was a short and easy step, the consequences of which have reverberated with ferocity down to the present day. The Babri Mosque, a declared national monument, was demolished by Hindu militants in 1992, inciting riots that caused thousands of deaths across the subcontinent. In 2010, the Allahabad High Court ruled that the infant god Ram Lalla was a legitimate litigant and granted this baby god one third of the disputed property. In 2020, under the watch of the ruling BJP, the Supreme Court granted full property rights to the very same Hindutva forces that had demolished the Babri Mosque, thereby granting them the very objective of their crime, the building of a new temple to Lord Ram at the exact spot where the Babri Mosque had stood. A few months later, the courts went further into judicial wilderness by acquitting all those accused of the Babri demolition, claiming that this was the work of unidentified antisocials. Antisocials they were, unidentified they certainly were not, as many had been captured on camera and many had openly boasted of their pious deeds. The 2020 Supreme Court judgment itself points to the year 1857 as the date when the Temple Mosque dispute first came to light because the British had then built a demarcation wall in the compound of the mosque. But the significance of the date escaped the notice of the court, and nowhere does its judgment speak of the First War of Independence or of the Hindu Muslim unity it had fostered. In actuality, the evidence of this unity in 1857 was witnessed at Ayodhya itself. An influential Hindu priest, Baba Ramcharan Das, and an influential Muslim landholder, Achan Khan, had made a pact of unity by which Hindus and Muslims could pray inside the compound of the mosque. This pact lasted almost 100 years, until 1949, when Hindu militants broke into the mosque at night and installed Ram idols there. Back in 1857, after the British had crushed the revolt, they hanged both Achan Khan and Ramcharan Das. That few remember these martyrs for communal harmony is an indictment of our education system, even before it had been openly saffronized. As it is past 3 a.m. where I live, I'm assuming that most listeners online today are from the USA. So let me first congratulate you for having rid yourselves of Donald Trump. Or at least that is the most likely scenario at present. The horrific damage Trump has caused will live on, or I should say die on, in terms of human lives lost to COVID and the destruction of the environment. The US Supreme Court has been saddled with right wing judges whose terms may last into the next decades. And yet, there is palpable hope in the air. Many dynamic new Democrats are slowly but surely climbing the leadership ladder, and on the street, the Black Lives Matter movement has imprinted its multiracial identity across the nation. Many of your TV channels also carry news of this hope and renewal. All this makes me jealous, for we in India are battling a system that is far cleverer and better organized than Trump and his allies ever were. The dictatorship here appears to grow stronger daily through the complete control of money, media, judiciary, military, elections, education, and the rewriting of history. This rewriting is mind boggling. During the freedom struggle, the adherents of Hindutva openly allied with the British, as did their counterparts from the Muslim League. V.D. Savarkar, who actually coined the term Hindutva, was the only representative of his ideology to go to jail in the Andamans for having supplied a gun that killed a British officer. But while in prison, he sent 5 separate petitions to the British, abjectly begging for mercy and promising lifelong allegiance to them if released. He kept his promise. After release, he never spoke against the British, but went on to mastermind the murder of Mahatma Gandhi. Today, anyone who speaks out is endangered. If the dissident belongs to a minority, the danger is often physical. Even if the dissident belongs to the majority community, if he or she is actually capable of reaching a wide base, the danger can still be physical, as we witnessed in the killings of Dr. Narendra Dabholkar, Comrade Govind Pansare, Professor Kalburgi, and Gauri Lankesh. The establishment, the, estab- the establishment has invented various terms for each type of dissident. Dalits are Maoist Naxalites, Muslims are Islamic jihadis, upper caste dissidents are urban Naxalites, and so on. All of them can be thrown into jail without trial under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the UAPA. To name just a very few of the hundreds of wrongfully arrested people under UAPA, Umar Khalid, who recently got his PhD from JNU, has been in jail now for over 2 months for speaking out against the Discriminatory Citizenship Amendment Act. And journalist Siddiq Kappan has been in a UP jail for well over a month for attempting to report on the horrific rape murder of a young Dalit woman in Hathras in Uttar Pradesh. Only the very brave now speak out when our constitution is bypassed and the special status granted to Kashmir upon accession is reversed without the consent of the Kashmiri people. Mahatma Gandhi had said at the time that the fate of Kashmir can only be decided by the people of Kashmir. We know what happened to Gandhi. My generation remembers that after Gandhiji's murder at the hands of Brahmin conspirators, many Brahmins faced the wrath of the people. The RSS and Hindu Mahasabha was banned and went underground. Even after the ban was lifted, they remained deeply unpopular for decades. Today, Gandhi's murder is reenacted with pride and joy in the city of Mathura, where a temple to his killer has been erected. Of course, the government pretends these elements do not belong to them, even though some of their members in parliament echo the very same sentiments on TV. The government remembers to hang portraits of Gandhi, Ambedkar, and sometimes even Bhagat Singh on its office walls, while ensuring that none of their ideas ever strain the mindsets of people. As a complicit, mass media either stays silent or celebrates India's transition from a country that won independence largely through non-violent struggles to a country that is willing to sacrifice the security of its oppressed and impoverished millions for the fake security provided by obtaining ever fancier weapons of mass destruction. Many of us are struggling to find an adequate response, perhaps ironically waiting for an act of God. One thing we do know: for the resistance we mount to have any chance of success, it must be non-violent and all-enveloping and cut across caste and creed, a coalition of believers and non-believers. Their bow and arrow will be met by our rainbow. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. There you go. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anand. Uh, we are looking forward to your participation in the Q&A. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce remarks by Father Anand from Varanasi. He's a convener of Jan Vikas Samiti, and Varanasi, of course, as you all know, is one of the holiest cities for Hindus. He's a Gandhian who is leading a campaign on communal harmony by spreading the message of peace. In his long career, he has worked in setting up non-formal education centers and has been active in various people's movements, including environmental initiatives. More recently, he has also been active in the anti-CAA movement, and he's a prolific producer of documentaries and street plays focusing on social issues. And he also has a number of publications to his credit and speaks 6 languages. Father Anand is also the coordinator of an alliance of various social organizations and activists of Varanasi who have been involved in relief work since the COVID-19 lockdown. Without further ado, let me give you Father Anand.
Greetings to all of you who are part of this webinar, and my special greetings to the organizers of this webinar and also my co-panelists, Asiya Syed and Anand Patwardhan. I express my heartfelt gratitude to Sunita Vishwanath of Hindus for Human Rights for inviting me to speak. I am asked to share my reflections and views on the topic persecution of minorities in India in the context of the reign of Hindu nationalism in India. I would like to start with the Christian community. Christian community in India is a minuscule community. As per 2011 census, Christians constitute only 2.3% of the Indian population. That is, 27.8 million people follow the Christian faith. Christians have contributed immensely for the nation building by establishing many educational institutions all over the country, hospitals, health centers, social service centers, and reaching out not only to the cities, but to faraway remote villages where others will not easily reach. Often, of course, there is the allegation of conversion. The most important mission of the Christians is not conversion. They follow the command of Jesus. I give you a new commandment: love one another as I have loved you. And they also have a responsibility to fulfill the command where Jesus says, whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, that you do unto me. My dear friends, Christians in India are a peace-loving community, and they do not retaliate with violence. They pray for those who persecute them. So they become victims of violence again and again. For the past 2 decades, Christians have become easy victims of violence in India. During the 1998 attack on Christians in southeastern Gujarat, from 25th December 1998 to 3rd January 1999, at least 20 prayer halls and churches were damaged or burnt down, and Christian people and Christian institutions were attacked in the Dangs district of Gujarat and its surrounding districts. And at least 25 villages had reported incidents of burning and damages to prayer halls and churches all over Gujarat, and many people could never return back to their villages. In 1999, on 22nd January, an Australian missionary, Graham Staines, and his two sons were burned to death by Dara Singh, member of a fringe Hindutva group called Bajrang Dal, while they were sleeping in the station wagon at Manoharpur village in Kenja district in Orissa. In 2007, 19 churches were burned by Hindu right wings in Odisha in the Kandhamal district. Again in August 2008, after the murder of a Hindu monk, Swami Lakshmanananda, by Maoists, Christians were blamed for the murder and they were attacked. For 3 months ahead, there were a series of violence on Christians in Kandhamal district. Some stories of persecution are too shocking. A nun serving in a social service center was raped by a gang. She, along with a priest, were paraded naked and beaten up. Village Christians were buried up to their neck and were asked to abandon their Christian faith. And on refusing to do so, they were either cruelly beaten up to death or petrol was poured over them and they were burned. Not a single person who was involved in the months-long violence has been punished. 7 innocent Christians were falsely accused of murdering Swami Lakshmanananda. All of them were convicted for life imprisonment and were languishing in the jail for the past 11 years. Only recently they were released on bail, yet they are not yet acquitted. So nearly 100 Christians were murdered, 300 churches were destroyed, 6,000 Christian houses were either plundered or torched, and 56,000 Christians were displaced and became shelterless, and some of them have not yet returned to their homes. From January 2014 to September 2020, there were 1,590 cases of violence against Christians all over India. In 2019, last year, there were 328 cases of violence on Christians. Only 36 FIR, first information reports, were filed. In 2020, up to the end of September, there were 198 incidents reported. One of the most striking examples of faith-based persecution was seen in the state of Chhattisgarh. The case in point happened on 19 September 2020. A mob of 200 villagers in Kakabeda in Kondagaon in Chhattisgarh gathered together and they harassed 15 Christian families. They severely assaulted one of the Christian men and threatened all of them to either abandon their faith or leave the village within 10 days. When the Christians denied to accede to their demands, they misbehaved with a Christian woman by tearing her clothes and subsequently destroyed all their houses. So there have been incidents of mob lynching of Christians in Jharkhand with false accusation of cow slaughter. There have been incidents of harassment of Christian voluntary organization serving the rural poor. There have been many incidents of Christian persecution in Uttar Pradesh. It is not the Christian institutions in the city which are affected, but the village communities are facing harassment. I would like to say that there's a large number of people who are not members of any church. They may not be baptized, but they attend the Christian prayer meetings. In these prayer meetings, these people of various religions experience peace, joy, physical and mental healing, and they continue to attend the meetings. There's no issue of change of religion. They continue to be part of their community, following the social and cultural traditions and customs. But these people are harassed and persecuted in many places by unsocial elements who follow the Hindutva ideology. They do not value or follow the age-old Hindu ideology of inclusiveness. They are filled with an arrogance, hatred, and competitive spirit, or even a sort of xenophobia, or the fear of the strangers and fear of people who are different from them. The unsocial elements barge into the prayer houses or houses of people and indulge in attacking and beating up praying people, especially women and girls. They do desecration and burning of Holy Bible, hymnals, and other sacred things. They do physical assault of the pastors, false cases that lead to the arrest of the pastors. When the victims approach the police refuse to file first information report because the police is under pressure. Then there is the social boycott of the believers. They are not given cereals and such groceries from the shops owned by the Hindus. In 2019, 91 cases of anti-Christian violence in Uttar Pradesh. And in 2020, it was 55 cases up to September. Christian pastors were bailed out from prisons. 47 pastors were bailed out in 2019 and 68 were bailed out in 2020. So this has been the situation of the persecution of Christians. Muslims constitute 14.2% of Indian population as per the census 2011. In the recent years, there has been a growing trend of Islamophobia, and Citizenship Amendment Act and talks about NRC or National Registration of Citizens are aimed at harassing Muslims. Other panelists will speak more about it, but I would like to highlight a recent incident. We who are working for communal harmony and for an inclusive Indian society were shocked to hear on 2nd November 2020 that one of our associates, a Gandhian Muslim, Faisal Khan by name, was arrested by Uttar Pradesh police. Faisal is the national convener of Khudai Khidmatgar, an organization founded by Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, was also known as Frontier Gandhi, a close friend of Mahatma Gandhi. Faisal revived this century-old organization, and he has been promoting communal harmony between Hindus and Muslims through this organization. Faisal, along with another Muslim and 2 Hindu youth, took out a long pilgrimage of Braj. He called it Chaurasi Kos Braj Parikrama. He visited Hindu and Jain temples, mosques, and gurudwaras. And 29th October, he reached Mathura and was welcomed by the priests of Nand Baba temple. They interacted with each other in a peaceful, loving, and joyful manner, quoting various scriptures. And they gave him prasad. And when it was time for Islamic midday prayer, Faisal expressed his desire to go out and pray and return. But the priest insisted that he does his namaz inside the Hindu temple premise as it is the place of God. He did accordingly. The video of him doing the namaz in the temple went viral in the social media. Some right-wing channels telecast them with narratives of Muslim encroachment into the temple and accused Faisal of causing disharmony between religions. Thus, on 2nd November, he was arrested from his home in Delhi. He is sent to the jail. All attempts to bail him out have not succeeded till the date. So here is a clear example of how goodness is pictured as evil and as a crime. This is one such harassment of Muslims. In Uttar Pradesh, the Muslims who are involved in weaving small-scale meat business have suffered immensely due to the wrong policies of the state government. Persecution of Dalits, the literal meaning of Dalits is depressed or oppressed, crushed, broken, exploited, ganged, mashed, or destroyed. The term is used collectively for all the untouchables situated in the lowest or the fourth notch of the Hindu social ladder as prescribed by the scriptures. The Dalits constitute 200 million or 20.02% of the Indian population as per 2011 census. But the total unofficial number of Dalits in the country is much more. According to some estimates, there are 15 to 20 million Christian Dalits in India, while the number of Muslim Dalits may be as high as 100 million or more. Were these figures to be confirmed, the number of Dalits in India could exceed 300 million, or a quarter of the country's population of 1.3 billion people. In the recent days, there were a series of violence against the Dalits in Uttar Pradesh in the form of gang rapes and murder of Dalit girls. The Hathras incident on 14 September 2020 and also in other parts of the state prove that rape is not happening because of sexual perversion, but rape is a weapon in the hands of the upper caste, a weapon for revenge to teach them a lesson. It happens due to an arrogance of one's caste, of one's party in power, and above all, the patriarchal and feudal mindset. India is a land of varieties of ethnic groups who are the original dwellers of this land. They constitute 8.6% of the Indian population. They live in the richest states of India, rich with minerals, beautiful land with rich resources of forest, water, and beautiful land. But they are the most deprived, the poorest of the poor, deprived of basic facilities, jal, jungle, zameen, that is water, forest, and land, which belong to them, have been taken away from the innocent tribals and handed over to the corporate companies. Through new laws such as land bank, animal corridor, the previous government in Jharkhand took away the land of the tribals who have been landowners, and they have now landed up in big cities as rickshaw pullers and laborers. Pathalgadi is one such incident. Tribals have their own traditional rules and regulations which have been incorporated into the tribal panchayati raj system or the tribal self-governing system. But these rules have not been followed while handing over their land to the corporate companies. So the tribals started a movement called Pathalgadi, which means erecting huge stones on which the laws which protect their land are inscribed and placed at the entrance of their village. The previous government in Jharkhand tried to suppress this movement by calling these activists as Maoists, and many were arrested and jailed. Sudha Bharadwaj and Father Stan Swami made an inquiry of the arrests of 4,500 tribal youth. These youth have been accused for their connection with Maoist insurgents, but the study proved that 98% of these youth did not have any association with the Maoists. Only 2% knew a few Maoists, but none were involved in any anti-state activities. Sudha and Stan filed cases against the then Jharkhand government and published a book on the heinous situation of the overcrowded jails. Thus, they were branded as terrorists, anti-nationals, and they are jailed by the National Investigation Agency. Father Stan Swami is 83-year-old and he suffers from Parkinson's disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, and many other health complications. 80-year-old Varavara Rao, who has also been fighting for the cause of the tribals and Dalits, is suffering from dementia and many other health complications. Anand Taltumde, Vernon Gonsalves, Arun Ferreira, Mahesh Raut, so many of these activists who are jailed were fighting for the rights of tribals. Sudha has been in jail for more than 2 years. Many appeals by renowned human rights activists from all over the world to release the aged and seriously sick activists have fallen on deaf ears. Thus, my dear friends, India is passing through a crucial period of human rights violations. It is unfortunate that this is being done in the name of nationalism. The truth is that the values of love for the weak and distrust, the values of compassion and kindness, values of justice and dignity of the weak have been thrown into the winds. What is rampant is selfishness, arrogance, insensitivity to the weak and the marginalized. India needs to revive, renew, and relive these values of humanness. More than religion or religiosity, what India needs is a spirituality of sensitivity and karuna or compassion. In the name of nationalism, xenophobia or the fear of the strangers or the fear of the others seems to be dominating India. What India needs is xenophilia or the love of the strangers or Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. India needs your support and solidarity for this cause of a revival of its values. Thank you.
Father Anand, thank you for that powerful indictment of the current state of affairs in our beloved country, India. And we are so happy that you're able to join us today so you can participate in the question and answers session. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the third speaker of the day, Gazala Salam, founder and president of the National Muslim Caucus of America, who has focused on building power at the grassroots level and is engaged in electoral work to help achieve racial, religious, and economic justice. She has built a national organizing infrastructure with the ability to mobilize a broad coalition of progressives to elect a diverse electorate in the United States that is inclusive and representative of all Americans. Without any further delay, it's my pleasure to give you the multi-talented Gazala. Perhaps she can also address some of her own comparisons in terms of what is happening in the elections here in the United States in terms of the advent of white nationalism. Thank you so much, Gazala, for joining us. And please take it from here.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you, Raju, Rajagopal, Sunita, Vishwanath, and the team of Hindus for Human Rights for inviting me to participate on this panel. It is such an honor to be on the panel with Anand Patwardhan and Father Anand. You know, I was born in India. I am a South Indian from Bangalore and moved here with my family when I was in the 5th grade. So I'm very proud of my Indian heritage. But you know what is happening right now, the current state of India and my own country here in America is just so disheartening. Human rights values seem to have no place in either country. And what happened in the last 4 years in our country, in the United States, seems to have emboldened people like Modi and others around the world, dictators, who want to govern their own way and just demoralize humanity and human beings. So when we talk about India, religious freedom seems to me is an inherent right for all human beings, not just in India, but everywhere in the world. Everyone has a right to believe or not to believe as per their conscience and live life openly, peacefully, and without fear. Freedom of religion or belief is an expansive right that includes that freedoms of thought, conscience, expression, association, and assembly. When talking about India, the Indian Constitution recognizes in Article 25 that all persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience and the right to freely profess, practice, and propagate religion. The Constitution also recognizes the right of minorities to keep their culture and religion, providing non-discrimination clauses in Articles 29 and 30. However, as we just heard from our panelist, I'm so shocked and surprised to hear the interfaith activists like Faisal Khan get arrested for praying in a house of worship. Think about that for a minute. How oppressive does one have to be to prevent another human being from remembering God in a house of worship? It's just mind-boggling. And we've seen, Islamophobia is on the rise here in our country, in the United States, across the world, and in India. And religious freedom here in America specifically is the first freedom. It is a core human right, human right. International law and treaty recognize a necessary component of US foreign policy and America's commitment to defending democracy and freedom globally, and a vital element of national security, critical to ensuring a more peaceful, prosperous, and stable world. But that's not what we have been experiencing here in this country. When a government promotes identity politics to incite violence, it has an impact on religious, economic, political, cultural, educational, ideological, and other identities. We see how divided the United States is currently, and white supremacy here is on the rise, and people like Donald Trump just love inciting the flame and fire of nationalism to incite fear, hate, xenophobia, and Islamophobia. Unfortunately, I strongly believe that he has emboldened fascists like him around the world. And the results of the recent presidential elections, I'm sure the whole entire world was watching. This was one of the longest elections of our country. The day seemed like it was never ending, but the results, were so historical. On the one hand, you had more people voting for Donald Trump in 2020 than they did in 2016. On the other hand, it also inspired people who value democracy, human rights, and pluralism to come out to vote in historical numbers to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. The world is a global village, and we really need to come together on the values of human rights, dignity, compassion, for the sake of humanity and human development. We have to learn to hold our representatives and our governments accountable. And that's part of the work that we do here at with the Muslim Caucus, is to engage our constituents at a very grassroots level, teaching them and training them on how to organize and how to hold your elected officials accountable, and how to elect representatives who are more diverse and inclusive, who represent the people in the community. And I know that could probably be very difficult in a country like India with so much corruption happening there, but I think organizing our communities is the way to fight against this type of fascism and dictatorship. The beautiful diversity of India, it becomes, when you have such beautiful diversity, rich history like India does, it becomes difficult to practice tolerance, and understanding of each other when you have Islamophobia, xenophobia, the Hinduvata movement, or in nationalism movements that are happening. People become judgmental. They think themselves superior to others, and divisions are born. And we see this, across the world. In these times, it's difficult times that I think humanity is experiencing, not just in India or America, but like I said, globally. Humanity is suffering. It is necessary for all of us as human beings to go beyond tolerance. Because to me, when people say be tolerant, it means I just have to tolerate you. I don't have to accept you or understand you, which in my view does not bring about unity. It lacks compassion, and we need compassion. We need to listen to each other. We need to understand each other as human beings. We're not born hating each other. We're not born with all of these religious views that we develop as we grow. Those are influences of society where we live in, our families, our parents, and our communities. But we are born as human beings, and we have to look at each other as human beings and learn to be more compassionate. And you can only have compassion when you try to understand the other people, rather than just thinking that I have to just tolerate them. It seems like the Indian government is moving fast towards normalizing injustice in the name of nationalism. Hindutva movement is a violent movement that incites hate, Islamophobia, and xenophobia. It is inciting violence, as we just heard from our other panelists, not just for against Muslims, but all minorities. It is becoming a very oppressive country, a very oppressive nation to live. I don't know of any religion that does not promote all forms of freedom, including religious freedom. And as human beings, we must stand together based on freedom, not on self-justification of each religion. There has been a rise of violent incidents of all religious minorities. Muslims, Christians, and other minorities in India do not have access to or enjoy the rights afforded to them by the Indian Constitution. And I think specifically since 2014, this persecution of religious minorities has been more prevalent and normalized by the Indian government. It's just unbelievable how a country that has so much rich history of religion, of culture, of ethnicities, of races has become such a huge oppressive society. It just does not make any sense to me, because the majority of religious persecution in India comes from Hindu nationalists. Attacks against any religious minority, but particularly against Christians and Muslims, are common. India's history as a multicultural and multi-religious society remains threatened by an increasing exclusionary concept of national identity based on religion. Indian society is changing from pluralistic to fragmented. Oppressive government who wants to govern not on the basis of democracy, but dictatorship. India is supposed to be the largest democracy in the world, but how much does religion influence India's democracy? Is it truly secular? The answer is no. So I would like to just stop there and discuss more with my other panelists and open up to questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Gazala.
Thank you.
You have a fellow Bangalorean here.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your remarks and for your work at the grassroots level in Florida. And I think we need to have more of such action going on in different parts of this country. I think one thing we have learned through these last 4 years is all the rights that we thought as first generation immigrants had been already paved for us before we came here. And our children can enjoy the fruits of the rights that ourselves and the civil rights activists had earned. It's now becoming very clear that every generation has to fight the battle all over again to preserve those rights. And that is the same is true of India, in terms of all of us having dreams of this wonderful secular society. In my generation, we have to encourage the younger generation to keep on fighting. Otherwise, we'll lose it sooner or later. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure now to introduce Sunita Vishwanath, my colleague at Hindus for Human Rights, to start the Q&A session. And somewhere during the session, we will play remarks by Professor Rajmohan Gandhi, who had an opportunity to listen to both the Anands 3 days ago. And his remarks are very, very powerful, and we would like to share them with you. So I'll leave it up to Sunita to tell me when I should bring Professor Rajmohan Gandhi's comments. Thank you, Sunita. Over to you.
Yes, good morning to everybody who's in the States, and good evening to everybody in India. Thank you so much for joining. Before we go into Q&A, because we have spoken so much about Faisal Khan, who is one of the advisory board members of Hindus for Human Rights, our brother, our dear beloved friend. I know there's an update about Faisal Khan's situation. Would Father Anand or Anand Patwardhan want to chime in right now and give us that update? Sandeep Pandey is also in the audience, and if Sandeep wants to do it, raise your hand, Sandeep. Somebody should give an update before we go into Q&A, even if it's briefly.
Yeah, Sandeep should do it because he just sent an update, which I saw.
Sure. So Giri, can you promote Sandeep ji to panelist, and let's hear from Sandeep for a couple of minutes. Sandeep ji, can you unmute and put your video on? We are so concerned about Faisal Bhai and are praying for his release.
It's not just Faisal, but his colleagues as well. Chand, whose house was recently, the police entered Chand's house and vandalized it and terrorized him, then also picked up other people from Delhi and are implicating everyone in this crazy case, which is shocking.
Yes. Sandeep ji, can you put on your video and unmute? Okay, so Anandji, can you, your volume is very low. Can you up your volume, and maybe until Sandeep ji comes, can you repeat what you said about, I mean, you basically gave the update.
Yeah, I'm not can up my volume. Can you hear me now? I'll just move closer to the mic.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, okay. So, so the update that I saw from Sandeep talked about Chand, who was also arrested with Faisal, and and the police then went to Chand's house in his home, vandalized it, stayed there, I mean, terrorized everybody there, and then they also arrested his brother from Delhi. And so the case is widening, and they just it's to me completely crazy that this happened, because as we saw in Father Anand's presentation, that that all Faisal had done was to pray, because the priest of that temple asked him to pray in the compound of the temple instead of going outside to do it. And this is what they did. That they were the whole situation is completely absurd.
Yes.
And
When Sandeep,
so there has to be a big international movement to put pressure on the government about these arrests.
Thank you, Anandji. And you know, Hindus for Human Rights and so many other organizations out here in the diaspora are ready to support in any way. And oh, here's Sandeep ji. Sandeep ji, do you have anything to add to what Anandji just said?
Actually, I was there in the initial part, but I had to go away for a while for some urgent work. So nothing more than what I have reported yesterday, that you know, on two dates, 18th and 20th, when the bail application was to come up for hearing, the investigating officer did not come, and it was told that he has been affected by COVID. And the judges said that, then somebody else on his behalf must come, or the report must be sent, even if he cannot attend the court. But that has not happened, and therefore the new date decided by the court is 24th. So we will have to wait until the 24th. But the manner in which the police is behaving, they went all the way from Uttar Pradesh to Bihar, Khagadia district, to locate Chand Muhammad, Faisal's colleague, who also offered namaz along with him in the temple. And when they couldn't find him, they beat up even the female members of the family. And they not only beat up the family members, but also the other villagers, who are close to Chand's family. And then they came to Delhi and detained his brother. I mean, we have seen cases where somebody is an accused and he or she is not appearing in public, and the police will go and harass the family members, and sometimes will make a family member sit at the police station so that the accused can surrender. But we have never heard of a family member of an accused being detained and taken to another city. And that is what has happened with Chand Muhammad's brother. He was taken from Mathura from Delhi to Mathura. And it was only after some advocates intervened in Mathura, because he would have to be produced before a magistrate under the law within 24 hours. And there was no arrest warrant against his brother. So it was totally illegal to have taken his brother from Delhi to Mathura. So he was released after the intervention of some advocates. But the way in which police is behaving, there is very little hope that Faisal or Chand Muhammad will get bail from court in Mathura. We may finally have to look up to the High Court here. Yeah.
Thank you, Sandeep ji, for the update. And I know you'll keep us posted and let us know when it's appropriate for us who are outside the country to raise our voice in some way. And
So
yes.
Yeah, I think that could begin. As we discussed, I and Anand Patwardhan. I think that campaign should begin now. We should not, because we don't know how long it is going to take in the court. But as I mentioned you over a mail, we will meet on 24th evening after witnessing what happens in the court, and then we will decide further course of action. But I think a campaign, should begin even at this time. National and international.
Why?
We are absolutely ready to raise our voice here and do a press conference and so forth. So many of the people in the audience are actually Hindus for Human Rights Advisory Board members. And we're all, I mean, he's one of, it would be the same, whoever it was, but this is particularly close to us because he's so close to us. So we're just very, very concerned and ready to be in solidarity.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Sandeep. Yeah, I wanted to ask Sandeep, why can we not move the Supreme Court? Just as Arnab Goswami, whose case was decided in 1 or 2 days. It took exactly 1 week for him to, while the matter was not sent back to the trial court, it was not sent back, went straight to Supreme Court, and he was out the next day. So if that can happen to Arnab Goswami, who was accused of abetting a suicide, why can't Faisal, who just offered prayer, be given bail by going to the Supreme Court directly? Why wait for what's happening in Uttar Pradesh? We cannot possibly expect justice in Yogi's domain, in the den of Yogi Adityanath. There's no possibility of justice.
Yes. Now he's busy bringing in a law against love jihad. So he has his preoccupations. But I think Anand bhai, we realize very well that Arnab Goswami got a preferential treatment. And with Siddiq Kappan, the Supreme Court said that first the lower court has to be approached. So I don't think in Faisal's case, Supreme Court will deliver,
No,
any
but
judgment of the
it's
kind.
for
Yeah,
us to try. We
ah,
can't be. I mean, like if
sure.
Chandrachud made that observation about liberty of the individual,
Yeah,
that has to be tested in court again and again.
So
yeah,
Sandeepji, Anandji, we will continue brainstorming our strategy, and many people who are in the audience are actually our comrades, and I'm sure they will join with us. But
Sure.
we have a number of questions, and so I'll be clubbing questions together whenever that makes sense. The first one actually disappeared from the Q&A section, but it was there, and I took a screenshot, so I happen to have it. And a number of the other questions echo this. I think, and maybe all of you can answer this in brief. The question is about the fact that within India, there's this prevalence of Hindutva as a force that's reigning right now. But at the same time, this particular question from an anonymous attendee talks about the recent French incident showing Muslim fundamental forces in the world standing against freedom and modern thoughts. And basically the question is, how can we do our work such that we keep both communal forces, both from the Hindu community and the Muslim community, away, at bay, and how can we achieve this? Basically, and there's 2 or 3 other questions that sort of raise the same issue that we are raising, many of us are raising our voices against Hindu extremism. But I think the sense of these questions is that the reason why Hindu community is being persuaded by this ideology is because not enough acknowledgement is made of the fact that there is extremism in other communities as well. I'd love to hear from all of you.
Can I go first? I'll just answer
Sure.
that. As a Muslim, I can tell you that I speak out against terrorism of all forms. And what we have to remember is when people try to justify their violence because someone else is violent, you're not doing any kind of justice to humanity or your community. So I think we all have to step back. Yes, there is violence. There are different people. There's diversity in every community, every religion, right? We are all human beings. We all share that same gene of of being born as human beings. So there is violence in every community, but it can never be justified no matter what the reason is. So just because these people, who are conducting violence in the name of religion doesn't mean that the religion is violence. Just like I know Hindus are, no religion tells you to be violent and go kill anybody. Every religion teaches and promotes peace and unity and humanity and understanding. So we can't use other person's violence to also use a broad brush and stereotype people to mean that, okay, this person in this community committed this sin, so that means everybody is like that. That's not true. I mean, we're on this panel now that has been organized by Hindus for Human Rights. And, so I think that we have to remember that. And for that, we have to be compassionate. We have to step back. We have to understand each other. We have to have an interfaith understanding of each other as human beings first. Think of each other as human beings first. And do not stereotype people.
Yes, thank you so much, Ghazala. And one thing I wanted to just mention, we were talking before about Faisal Khan. Hindus for Human Rights was able to bring some 23 plus Hindu community members, and including priests and swamis, many in India, some abroad as well, to stand with Faisal Bhai. And I think that kind of work is very,
Yes.
very important. Anandji,
Yeah.
Father Anand.
Yeah, I'll talk about the killings in France, and I just want people to know that there's an organization in India called Indian Muslims for Secular Democracy, and they took a very strong stand against the killings. And many Muslims all over the world have done that, have spoken out. So to accuse the Muslim community at large of supporting these killings, I think is wrong. I would say a large majority of people have stood up against the killings. At the same time, I think that every time such a killing happens for Hindu fundamentalists or Hindu violent Hindutva elements to point the finger and say, look at them, that's why we do what we do, is completely crazy, because it's a chicken and egg argument. And it has gone on. This kind of argument will never end. And also, as I pointed out in my talk earlier, many times the authors of these extremist groups are not actually religious elements. They're people who gain from these acts. There are geopolitical forces that actually have encouraged Islamic fundamentalism in order to capture territory, in order to capture the oil. And it has happened in the whole of the last century, and it's happening every day. I mean, what is Al Qaeda? What is ISIS? Who started it? We have to ask those questions. And Hindutva has to understand that they themselves were started by the British. So, if the fundamentalists recognize who their actual fathers are, maybe they will learn to disown them and stop being fundamentalists, because they're just puppets.
Yeah, I would like to add that when we speak about Hindu nation, against Hindu nation or Hindu nationalism, in the same breath, we also condemn Islamic State. And as a Christian, I would like to say that any Christian dreaming about Christian kingdom or Christendom, that is condemnable. And we wouldn't encourage that, because that goes against the values of democracy, and we don't want theocracy. We don't, in the context of secularism, these don't go well together. I have I'm under correction, but with regard to the our culture in India, I would prefer that we do not ridicule any religion. Secularism doesn't mean lack of religion or no religion. In India, our understanding of secularism is respect for all religions. So if in India, I'm not speaking about France, they have a different context, but in India, to go around with comics about Prophet Muhammad condemning or ridiculing, or that doesn't suit here, because we understand that many in the Muslim community, even so-called educated people, they have a very different understanding compared to others, because many of them have, too much centered only on religion, which is not real teaching of Quran, but things which have come up recently. So we would be provoking them when we use comics and cartoons and make fun through caricaturing and all that. So respect for every religion and is also part of secularism and for a better democracy.
Thank you, Father Anand. I wanted to say, if people in the audience, especially Hindus for Human Rights friends and advisory board members, if you would like to have your mic turned on and ask your question, if you promise to be very brief, because we want to be mindful of time, just raise your hand and we can see when you raise a hand. Somebody called Kishore Givala is in the audience, and he has typed in several questions in the Q&A. So can we let him speak? Kishorji, can you ask one of your questions briefly? Your mic is is on. Kishorji, if you want to ask one question briefly.
Yes, hi, good morning. The biggest question I have is about the validity of religions all over the world, which has caused more harm than good, because the religions were formed as a source of fear by tribal communities, that if you don't look like me, if you don't pray like me, then I am afraid. The whole idea is that the religion or personal belief or how you pray to your God should be your own personal business, should be basically limited to your own private and situation, but not to impose upon anybody unless we get an extraterrestrial attack on the world. We as human beings will not be united, and that will be the downside of the whole planet, as we in America experience the same thing. I'm calling from Baltimore, Maryland, and this
Thank
is
you,
the problem.
Kishorji. Thank you. Do any of our panelists want to respond to Kishore?
Yeah, when you talk in Islam, I think that, these are all self-taught things that we kind of absorb from the culture and the community we live in. Because when you really look at the scripture of Islam, there is no compulsion in religion. We cannot force someone to follow our practice. You have the freedom to do what you want. But yet we see this over, everywhere, whether it's Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East, India, Pakistan, wherever it is, everybody thinks that their religion is the best religion, and that has to be the way it is. Those are all perceived things that we kind of embody based on the culture that we live in or the societies that we live in. So education is very important. Understanding your own faith and understanding the community that you live in and understanding people is so important for us to shed all of those things that we've kind of embodied and made that normalizing those things. So yeah.
Father Anandji, Sandeepji, anyone else want to respond?
Yeah, I would agree with Kishorji partially, saying that religion has, of course, been the cause of a lot of conflicts, a lot of violence. Wars have been fought in the name of religion, whether it is Christianity or Islam, or even in India, if you look back into the history, we see a lot of fights, war in the name of to show the dominance of one's religion. So many nationalists may not agree to that. It's true. At the same time, when we look into the history, religion has had positive contribution also. If you look in the origin of Islam, it's very evident that the tribes which were fighting in Arabia to put an end to these wars between small tribes fighting in the name of their gods and goddesses, Prophet Muhammad brought them together and he started this religion. So religion has provided social values, perpetuated good positive values of the society, family values, and many things. And the world today may be different, but in the past, in the Middle Ages and all, although they were vast, they were also the human values taught by religion and sustained by religion. So at the same time, I would like to say in today's context, religion has to teach its people, its followers, to go beyond religiosity, to go beyond exclusiveness, and to look for a spirituality. And spirituality is not exclusive. It goes beyond the borders of religion, of one's own religion. And genuine spirituality is universal, common to all religions. So we have to work towards that, a common spirituality. If our own religion, our own faith does not take us to a higher sphere of spirituality, then all these religions are meaningless.
Thank you, Father. You're making me miss our good friend who recently passed away, Swami Agnivesh. You're sounding just like him. Very sad that he passed. There's an anonymous attendee who has a question. He's asking how many people are actually here with us. There's about 54 people here, and about twice as many had registered. And this particular anonymous attendee is wondering if we are an echo chamber. And this is something I'd like to pose to all of you as a question. Just yesterday in the New York Times, there was an op-ed that really upset me. It was somebody who was saying that given the divided nation that US is, the wisdom is that we should speak to, he is not a Trump supporter, that non-Trump supporters should speak to Trump supporters, but he's tried it and he's given up. And it upset me because I still feel that our job is to connect across the aisle. And we are Hindus for human rights, and we are trying so hard to not be an echo chamber and to wake up the Hindu community in the States and, of course, in India. So what do you all have to say about our bubbles, our echo chambers? Are we an echo chamber today? And what can we do to reach across the aisle? Or are you feeling like the op-ed writer yesterday? His name was Wajahat Ali. Have you given up? I'd love to hear from all of you.
Well, I think we may at the moment right now be an echo chamber because the word hasn't gone widely enough to attend this kind of thing. But that doesn't mean that we give up, because even if we are an echo chamber, it does serve some purpose to exchange ideas, because it would improve our strategies, it will improve our thinking, to hear each other, even if we have broad agreement on many things. And I just wanted to answer Kishore's question. Was it Kishore, the Ghiwala?
Yes.
The question who talked about extraterrestrial attack on the planet, but the actual attack is coming from terrestrials. The attack on the planet is coming from, the people who live on this planet who are actually on the verge of destroying it completely. So this planet has very few years left if we are to proceed on the path we're proceeding on. And perhaps the only religion that could fight this is the Adivasi religion, the people who believe in nature, in preserving nature, and their gods and goddesses were nature itself. So I think that we need to learn from the indigenous people of the world how to let this planet survive.
Absolutely. Anybody else would like to speak to this question?
Yeah, I think we are, you may seem like an echo chamber but when there's oppression happening, we have to speak out. We have to speak out against the oppression. So it may seem like to some people like this is an echo chamber or people are just talking about this. It's because we as human beings need to stand up against oppression. And if we don't do that, we're silent. Those who are silent will be the next people who will be oppressed, so yeah, that's the humanity in us that we need to speak out against oppression.
Thank you, Gazala.
Sunita, can I make a quick comment on the echo chambers?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
This is Raju.
This is Raju. My thought is, we all think we have echo chambers, but there's an echo chamber on the East Coast and the West Coast and Australia and UK and India. And these echo chambers aren't talking adequately to each other. So as a first priority, and I think as Anand Patwardhan pointed out, there is a lot to be done to form alliances and to what I call as connecting the islands of resistance to what is happening in the world. To me, that's a higher priority and more fruitful than trying to reach across the aisle, even to my own family, who will not listen to me about Hindutva. So I just want to make that point. There is more to our work than just one echo chamber. Let's connect multiple echo chambers. And
we are
increase.
doing so
Yeah.
right now. This is an international group that has come
Exactly.
together.
Thank you.
And you know, in response to the op-ed that you were saying, I think that that kind of talk it causes more anxiety in the community and more divisiveness. You can't give up. You know, I feel like you have to continue the conversation.
Yes.
Giving up
I
is
feel that
not the way
strongly.
to do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially because like Raju just said, these opposing views are within our own intimate circles.
Right.
You can't, it's like chopping off your arm to say,
yeah.
Anyway, so I agree with you, Ghazala. Giri is on from Hindus for Human Rights. And Giri, you have a question?
Yes, it's a very brief question. And it also relates to one of the questions that was raised. Especially in secular democracies, we often raise this point of keeping religions separate from politics. But this is a direct quote from Gandhi, which I'm reading from his book. This is very interesting. So back in 1924, even before India was independent, Gandhi says, "Thus it will be seen that for me there is no politics devoid of religion. They subserve religion. Politics bereft of religion are a death trap because they kill the soul." So, in Gandhi's process, Gandhi saw probably religion and politics as a deeply interconnected process. I would just love to hear everyone's perspective on this.
Go ahead, Anandji.
Yeah, I talked about this in my talk as well, is that I think that what Gandhi did was to bring his own ethics and call it religion. It wasn't the religion of the day, because the religion of the day was more, I mean, the most dominant religion is Sanatan Dharma, which is full of nothing but caste and hierarchy and violence. It's all embedded in it. I mean, all our Hindu gods have weapons, and they go to war often, and so what Gandhi did was to turn it on its head and actually he called it Hinduism, but it was his own ethics. And I think if somebody is doing that, if somebody is bringing their own non-violent, compassionate ethics and calling it religion, I have absolutely no problem with it. But any religion that promotes violence of any kind is a problem. So I think that while we accept that there is good in religion and we want to connect all religions together and find the good things in it, I think that this method, which I call a kind of liberation theology, which is what Ambedkar did also with Buddhism, because he didn't accept everything about the Buddhisms of the world. He didn't accept reincarnation, for instance. He saw the rational elements in Buddhism, the main, which is a rational religion anyway, and emphasized that. So I think that is an exercise that is worth doing, for the simple reason that one advantage that religion has over people like me is that religion has had thousands of years in power to build religious culture. They have all these icons, they have all these festivals, they have everything, they can mobilize millions of people in the name of religion, because there are different days for different things and different gods and goddesses, and you can go on through the whole year, uh, mobilizing people. While people who are secular, who believe in this kind of, we have to invent our own culture. We have to actually not invent, but we have to find through history the symbols of people who took us forward on the path towards humanity. So whether it was the Buddha, or whether it was Kabir, or whether it's Guru Nanak, and we have to revive those, and we have to create our own new icons of a new culture of what we want. So that is a difficult job compared to those who can fall back on religion, and then they have everything ready-made.
Anandji and everybody, David Barun Kumar Thomas is in the audience and he's raised his hand. He's a student of Gandhi and a scholar of Gandhi. So David G, do you want to ask your brief question and maybe also touch on Giri's question? If you can. You'll need to unmute, and if you like, turn on your camera.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, everybody, and a particular hi to Father Anand, whom I'm seeing after 5 years. I don't know if he remembers that I was there during the Lok Sabha elections in 2015.
Yes, I remember you very much.
Hi.
Glad to see you.
Good to meet you too. About Gandhi and his bringing religion into politics, that's something he mentioned time and time again. And in fact, whenever he was accused of bringing religion into politics, he'd always say, I plead guilty to that charge, because I think that what's wrong with politics is that there is no religion in it. And by that, what he meant was what Anand said some time back, that basically there should be a spiritual and ethical foundation to politics. If you don't have that spiritual and ethical foundation to politics, then all that is left is a grab for power and self-interest and everything else which you're seeing today. So you do need to have a spiritual, ethical, and moral basis to the activity called politics. And Gandhi said that he was trying to do just that. And he took particular pains to say this again and again. And I think we must remember that. And here, as Anand pointed out, by religion is simply meant that there has to be an ethical and moral foundation to our involvement in politics.
I would like to add that, adding to what Anandji said, for Gandhi being an efficient communicator, he used the language of the people, and very especially the religious terminologies. When he spoke about Ram, it was not always the Ram of Ayodhya. When he spoke about Ram Rajya, what he meant is the divine, the kingdom of God in a universal manner, ethics and ethical values, ethical principles. So we must understand that Gandhi's language, Gandhi is often quoted even by the extremists, the nationalists today, but the language is misunderstood, misinterpreted. His quotes are misinterpreted. So we must look at Gandhi through that perspective. He was almost like Kabir. Kabir also spoke about Ram and Rahim and all that. But the same manner, for Kabir, Ram was not the Ram of the king of Ayodhya, but the terminology which common people use. Ram is just a terminology, a term for God. So for Gandhi, religion was, there was principles of ethics, a practical thing to hold on to for social life, for a better ethical and moral life.
Thank you, Father.
I agree with that, but you know what, though? Today we see the opposite, right? Of people using religion for power. Politics, religion has become so political, whether it's in India or America or Saudi Arabia, wherever you see. And people have forgotten the moral values and ethical values of their religion. And I think we need to change. There has to be a revival of what ethics and morality really mean on a human rights values and human dignity and respect. What does that mean, you know, on a global scale?
Which is why, just to interject, which is why Gandhi, towards the latter part of his life, took to saying that you don't need to believe in religion, you only need to believe in truth, that truth is God. And he emphasized this again and again, because he said the truth is something no one can disagree with. And truth is basically what all religions talk about, the belief in what exists, in what is real. And if you believe in what exists and what is real, you'll automatically believe in what is honest, what is good, and what is needed. And that, I think, to my mind, is a sufficient definition of religion to start with. And that is the definition of religion which Gandhi used when he said that I do want to bring religion into politics.
I just wanted to add that while we need Gandhi and ethics, we need Dr. Ambedkar in equal measure, because Dr. Ambedkar is talking not only about ethics, but he's talking about rights. And that is where our constitution comes in. That is where you have to have laws that are egalitarian, and you can't just depend on some kind of woolly-headed goodness, because it has to translate down to the people, and you can't do that without rights, without laws, and without building a structure of society where this egalitarianism is actually implemented. So I think that very often the Gandhians forget Ambedkar and the Ambedkarites forget Gandhi, and we really need both of them as much as we need Marx and Bhagat Singh. So because again, they're talking about rights, they're talking about justice for the poorest of the poor.
And that's why we need echo chambers like these to keep talking about those things.
And connecting the islands of echo chambers. I'm doing a time check. There are a number of questions which I'm going to club together, but before I do that, Porus Dadaboy, one of our good friends in the States, has been waiting patiently, but you have a big question. I ask you to, we will unmute you, and if you could ask a brief version of your question, and then if the response can also be brief, it would be great.
Gonna ask the big question. I'm just gonna ask a small question.
Okay.
My second question. You all are talking a lot, and you've been classified as an echo chamber by yourselves. I think all we need is action, and action indicates being an interceptor. Action indicates being on the site where people are rioting and marching and whatever it is, and being an interceptor as we do in the United States. I have been in Chicago as an interceptor. We are training interceptors. So the purpose is not to talk, but to actually go on the site and be action oriented. So what are you guys doing to be action oriented?
Can everyone answer quickly? Because I know you're all doing nothing but action. I see it from where I stand. So go ahead.
Yeah, we organize, that's what we're doing. We're training people. We're trying to educate people on why it's important for them to get involved. Democracy only works if we, the citizens of that country, get involved in the democracy. So in the process, and we're trying to educate them on what that process looks like, why they should get involved and exercise their agency in holding their representatives accountable and electing the right kind of people that are representative of them, that are inclusive, that understand democracy, human rights, values, justice and equity, and stand up for peace. And actually, my next question to the whole panel, especially folks from India, I was going to ask you, what are the action items? What are the things that folks in India are doing to stand up against all of these things? And one of our action items is to connect with groups like Hindus for Human Rights and people abroad and everywhere else, so that together we're building an infrastructure that can make our voices be heard to the powers that be, who can change. When US is making policies or trying to work with India, we need to make sure that they are adding in these, they're holding the government accountable. We can't just build all of these bilateral relationships and economic development. All that is great, but when there is no peace in the country, when human rights violations are happening, just for someone praying in a temple, being arrested for praying in a house of worship, that just talks volumes about the state of mind of that government and that country, and how corrupt they are and how oppressive they are. So we need to do all we can at every level, from everywhere, to fight against this.
Yeah, I would like to add that here coming here in India. Coming Thursday, we have the Constitution Day, 26th of November. So most of us will be in the streets organizing programs of public programs, and we'll be talking about human rights and the rights which are assured by the Constitution. And most of what's happening now goes against what's written in the Constitution. The arrests and detention of the human rights activists, people who have dissenting with the government are being targeted. So we highlight these and we encourage the people to raise their voice, to fight for the rights. And I believe Anand Patwardhan makes films and organizes programs in Mumbai. And the best person to answer to this is Sandeep Pandey. He has often, almost every day, programs in the streets and advocacy, lobbying with people of all types to fight for people who are marginalized, asking for their rights. I think Sandeep should come in and speak.
Yeah, so one thing that we consciously do is in all our events, we ensure that there is equal participation of people from different caste and religious communities, as well as we ensure gender diversity. So, for example, during the lockdown, we were running kitchens, community kitchens, and 12 of them were running in Lucknow and 23 overall. And we have written up an article which has appeared in the Indian Cultural Forum portal. And, we had a wonderful example of Hindus and Muslims together running kitchens. So, Jeenath, for example, was in charge of a kitchen where, people from Hindu community were also eating. There was a kitchen in which they needed Uzma, a Muslim woman who was running the kitchen, needed somebody to make rotis. And it was a person, by the name of Sandeep, who came forward to make rotis. So various examples like this. And even among our donors, even though the area of Lucknow in which we were working was predominantly Muslim, so most of our beneficiaries were Muslim, but most of our donors were Hindus. And I am glad to tell you that even in the divided, communal atmosphere of India, nobody ever raised a question as to why Muslims were disproportionately being benefited from our, relief efforts. But I would specifically like to mention a long-term project that we have undertaken in Ayodhya, and that is to build a multi-faith harmony center. So the vision I have is the trust has been registered. The UP government is not allowing us to open a bank account in Ayodhya yet, and Sunita is witness to the journey that we tried to undertake from Lucknow to Ayodhya, and we were stopped by the police and sent back to Lucknow. So this has happened 3 times with me since the decision on Kashmir was taken in August. But we have the trust in place, and I have handed over the letter to my chief minister, and I have informed him that the Sarv Dharm Sadbhav Trust, which is the name of the formal registered trust, is going to build a multi-faith harmony center not very far from where the Ram temple is being built. And the conception I have in mind is a multi-storied building where the ground floors will be empty room reserved for atheists like me, and then counting from the first floor, each floor will be given to one religion in the historical order in which they have come. And on the top, there'll be provision to build several more floors, for the future religions. What we have in mind. But I don't know whether they will allow us to build this kind of tall building, given the number of religions which are there in existence. And if we take all the tribal religions, that I don't know how many floors will have to be built. But we would build some kind of building where a person following any religion would be welcome. And let me tell you that Faisal Khan has performed namaz multiple times in this Ram Janki temple, the temple where this multi-faith harmony center is going to come up. And the priest, Yugal Kishore Shastri, just said the other day he never had any problem with Faisal offering namaz in his temple. So it will be a place where anybody will be welcome and free to perform their prayers in the manner that they would like to do. So this is our objective, and we hope to achieve it someday. And we hope that there will be a day when more people will be visiting this multi-faith harmony center than the Ram temple in Ayodhya.
Thank you, Sandeepji. Thank you. And just so that we give a little tiny bit of international context to what Sandeepji is talking about, a decade ago, my friend, who's a Kashmiri American, Daisy Khan, and her husband, who's an imam, and many other people came together to build pretty much what you're describing, Sandeepji, a communal harmony, multi-faith center close to Ground Zero. It was going to be called Park 51. And it was opposed virulently, and it didn't happen. And so it's not just in India that such a beautiful project is very hard to achieve. So we're coming, time is running out. What I'll do is I'll ask three of the questions. Many of these questions are for you, Anand Patwardhanji, but I'll just ask them, and maybe if we can have just very quick 1 minute or less remarks from each of you, and then we'll close by showing the video of Rajmohanji's comments from the 18th. So three of the questions that I'm seeing are, one person is asking, so we have, Anandji, I think you mentioned an organization, a secular Muslim organization in India. We are Hindus for Human Rights. We work closely with Indian American Muslim Council. So the question is, what is the wisdom of having these organizations and movements that are within a community as opposed to everybody together? And so I personally, I've seen, my whole life, people from India saying, I'm a proud Indian, and fighting for rights in India. And it took Hindutva and its ugly face being revealed to me to persuade me that I need to actually organize as a Hindu. That's my entry point into this. And probably all of us in Hindus for Human Rights have a story like that. But that's one question. The other two questions here are, where, in order to do this work, especially those of you in India, but even here, takes so much courage. Where does that courage come from for each of you? And the third question is, where do you find sanity and hope? Because the situation is crazy no matter which way you look. So if you want to touch on any of those questions, go ahead. If you want to say something else as your closing remark, go ahead. Just a minute, about a minute each, and then Raju, you can show Rajmohanji's video. So go ahead, thank you so much.
I'll respond to the last part because I think I know that fascism is not sustainable. It never has, wherever it occurred, it didn't last very long. Mussolini didn't last very long. Hitler didn't last very long. And I don't think Trump didn't last very long. I hope. And I think Modi and their gang will not last very long either. The history moves in cycles, and it's silly to get disappointed and give up in the middle of that cycle, because things will change. They are changing, even though we don't see it in front of our eyes, but it is happening. So I think that is what we need to focus on, that none of this is permanent.
You sound like a Hindu.
I have no problem with Hindus who believe in particle theory. That you know, particle theory is a kind of some kind of Hinduism which believes that everything is little particles. You don't have that God would exist in every human being, in every living thing, all of that. So that kind of belief in something all pervasive is okay. No problem with that. And I agree with you that the reason that you have reinvented yourself as Hindus for human rights is precisely because of what the Hindutva has been doing, and you have to address the community, and you can't do it from the outside. It's easier to do it from the inside.
Yes, thank you. Would others like to chime in? Father Anand?
Nothing special to say that, yeah.
About where you get your hope from and your courage?
Oh,
Because
that's the question. Okay.
You're right in Varanasi, which is one of, I mean, it's such a holy place for Hindus, but it's also a place of tension.
Okay. I would like to say that my own faith inspires me to be active, to be at the service of others, very especially for when we see the situation of human rights violation, injustice, poverty, and the rights being violated in different ways. So I am I'm trying to be a spiritual person, and I try to identify God, the divine, in the human phases, and very especially the poor. So then the vision is clear, becoming clearer day by day. And the more opposition, the more challenges, the challenges, they themselves become inspiration, become opportunities to be at the service of the other. And then the main work which I do these days is trying to coordinate with people, to get in touch, to network with people of similar thinking, like-minded people and organizations. And I do realize that we can't do anything of our own. And we go beyond the frontiers of religion. And then we have our own identities, people with different religious identities, and we maintaining those identities, we go work together also. A lot of what we call the dialogue in action. So at the service of the other. So that works well, and that unity in diversity, people holding hands of each other, the Muslim imams and the Hindus and Christians and Sikhs, everybody working together, that gives us more strength, more courage, more zeal and enthusiasm.
Thank you so much. Gazala?
Yeah, so I think it's, for me, it's my faith that inspires me every day, because the very essence of what I have learned from my own spirituality and my faith is that equity and justice are so important for peace and human development. So when there's no equity and there's no justice, there can be no peace and there's no human development. That's what drives me every day. And my own spirituality inspires me to leave this earth a better place than what I found it. So I live by those principles, and I live by the principle that whatever I want for myself, I want for my brothers and sisters, my neighbors, my friends, my family, and my community. So that's what keeps me going every single day. And I see the entire universe as one humanity. And so when there's oppression, discrimination against any community, it's like there's a violation against me. So I have to speak out and I have to do what I can. And I think what I want to say, my dream, Sandeep ji, would be to have a center for harmony, which does not divide every faith into a different floor, but where everyone can come and meet together in that one floor and you know, just be there together. That's what that's my dream.
Let's build it together.
Let's build it together.
Thank you all so much. Going back to Porospai's question, I can stand witness and testimony to the fact that everybody on this panel, there's not a day that goes by without courageous, life-threatening, visionary action. And I'm so proud, and we're all so proud to be connected with all of you. And the work goes on. Faisal Bhai needs to be released. So many of our brothers and sisters need to be released. And in democracy itself needs to be, you know, saved. I don't think that's an extreme statement. So we are with you all in India. Just so much respect and love. And please stay safe. And whatever you're doing on Constitution Day, please, you know, wear masks and all of that. We are in a pandemic, and your health and safety is important on that score as well. Please don't take it lightly. Raju now will show Raj Mohanji's statements from the other day. They were very emotional and moving. And I think we'll show the video statements. Everybody who had questions we didn't get to, please email them to us at info@hindusforhumanrights.org, and we will correspond with you, or if necessary, connect you to the speaker that you wanted to talk to. So thank you all so much. Namaste, and Raju, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all. I'll play this video, which was a reflection by Professor Rajmohan Gandhi after he heard the two Anands speak the other day. It's about 17 minutes long, but I think he really also brings together what's happening in India and what's happening here. And we appreciate his participation. So here I go.
Thank you. Hello, Raju. Hello, Sunita. It was good to hear the powerful, painful presentations by the two Anands, Anand Patwardhan and Anand the father. So the picture we have witnessed, heard of India is extremely serious. It does not surprise those of us who are aware of. And it's our duty to make this picture available to as many people as we can. These are, of course, very grim times for many countries. India is perhaps the largest among them. Certainly, India and China are two most populous countries in the world. We don't know too many details of what's happening in China, but we've heard some things about Xinjiang. We know a bit about Tibet. So we know that China also has very serious issues, and we certainly know, as has been confirmed by the two Anands today, of the very serious situation in India, and the persecution, the violence, the torture, the injustice, an endless sequence of human beings, in many cases wonderful human beings. This is painful beyond description, especially to somebody like me, who was born a few years before independence, who saw the trauma of the 47 killings, and who then also saw the incredible way in which India reorganized herself and determined to end the toxicity, the madness, the hatred, the violence, the ill will of 47. And for several decades thereafter, yes, lots of injustice continued, lots of horrible things continued, but India had found a new way, so it seemed. But now, in the last several years, along with many other countries in the world. This idea that a nation belongs not to everybody in that nation, but to one group in that nation, one strong group in that nation. Sometimes the majority in that nation, not necessarily, but the most dominant group in that nation should control that nation. America doesn't belong to everyone, but white Americans must rule America. India doesn't belong to everyone, but Hindus must rule India. So this notion that some are more equal than others has gained great strength in the world. In many countries, country after country after country. Recently in the United States, that notion received a very healthy setback when Trump was defeated. And yet the US too faces great challenges. But of one thing I'm absolutely certain, with all the delineation, the details of horrible, horrible cruelty in the world, the injustice in the world, that the human spirit will not tolerate it beyond a certain point. And that equality and dignity and mutual respect, the commonness of all of humanity, are principles which will in the end triumph. When Father Anand showed, among other things, those pictures of humble people, very poor Muslims, Christians, Hindus, people of different religions, all meeting in various villages, praying together, seeking the Almighty's protection together, expressing their fellowship one with the other. That is a very real force. And the victory of that fundamental idea is absolutely certain. And I celebrate that victory, although I may be celebrating it many months, many years, I hope not too many years in advance. But I celebrate that in advance because the idea that some people should, with cruelty and hatred, rule over the others is absolutely contrary to the human spirit. This planet, this precarious planet, belongs to everybody living in it, everybody living in it. And the United States is this amazing example. Yes, the US also has witnessed domination, cruelty, inequality, slavery, injustice, the dispossession of the original people of this land. All that the US has witnessed, and yet the US is constantly reinventing itself. And the union is constantly being improved, bettered. And so here we have a chance. And this is a global battle. It's not an Indian battle, not an American battle, not a battle for Hungary or for Turkey, for a few countries. It is a battle in every single country. And I'm very glad, very pleased that Hindus for Human Rights has organized this. What an amazing presentation, thoughtful, biting, powerful from Anand Patwardhan. And what a vivid and equally painful, hurtful presentation from Father Anand. But prodded by these presentations, we will do, all of us, even more than we have done, to continue to work for the eventual inevitable triumph of equality, dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rajmohanji. It was a surprise that you had joined us. And can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, sure.
Okay, okay. Oh, I have one question that has been bothering me ever since the recent elections here. When we see over 70 million people voting for Trump, despite what to many of us seems like a runaway presidency in every aspect, There are people that are saying we must reach out to those people. They can't all be bad people. We must reach out to those people. A similar question can be asked in India as well, about reaching out to people that are supporting Modi. And uh, I have a dilemma in my mind as to where we would be better off spending our time, reaching out to people that have all access to all the very same facts and data that we do, and yet they seek to support the policies of Modi or Trump, or do we spend that time building coalitions across the world who think like us, so we can have a larger coalition, not just for India, but across India and the US and elsewhere, who can perhaps strengthen our voices and be able to oppose nationalism in other parts of the country. I know it's not a question of either or. We at some level we need to do both, but I do keep coming across that dilemma time and again as to where we should spend our time. I don't know if you have any words of wisdom, any words of advice on what you think.
Well, it's a tremendous question, Raju, tremendous question. I certainly don't have a clear or simple answer to it. It is a question that many people are asking themselves all over the world. And I think, although you've mentioned the US and India, what you're asking is also valid in many other parts of the world. And I think that is something that should maybe help us to see what is happening. Is it that suddenly 49.5% of the world, or 51 or 52% of the world has become terrible? Obviously, that may not, we don't know. We can't absolutely say with finality what is happening, but at least at one level, it seems unreasonable to imagine that suddenly, or through one process, roughly one half, or slightly less than, or slightly more than one half of the world has become bad or horrible. I think that, yes, many people who have the same information as the rest of us have about the mountain of lies and palpable falsehoods and the horrible improprieties of every kind, the rudeness, the so forth, that should put off many more people, but it hasn't. And I think that, let me put it this way, somebody asked me, referring to the large numbers, the absolutely huge numbers in America who listened with great devotion, obvious adoration to Trump. Do they think that he cares for them when it is widely known that it's clear that he really cares for himself? Do these people imagine that he cares for them? And my tentative answer is something like this. No, they may not feel that he cares for them rather than for himself, but he seems to care for what they care for. So what is it that they care for? A variety of things, it must vary from place to place, but there is some kind of pride in the flag, some kind of belief or picture of a country that they had nursed, say in the United States, a country where whites are dominant. Now, others may see this as an unsatisfactory thing, that the domination won by the other. But then if you're used to this domination and you belong to that group, then that is the world in which you were comfortable. And you see that world changing. First, a black president came in the United States, and now people who are openly speaking about changing the culture, about strictly or firmly, or in some cases, harshly dealing with an earlier culture. That will not please everybody, obviously. So I would say that no matter how inadequate or flawed this reasoning might be, so there is some humanity in these people which we must find ways of appealing to without relenting for half a second on the need for solidarity among everybody else. So as you said, that we have to work on many fronts. Each one of us has to find how to divide our day, our hours, our minutes, how best to divide.
Okay, Raju, do you want to wrap up? Just
Yes. Can
send
you
us
hear me?
on our way. Yes.
Can you hear me? Thank you all. I stopped the video. It goes on for a few more minutes, but in consideration of the time, I would like to thank Rajmohan ji for that excellent analysis. We can leave with that. Thank you all very much for joining us. This has been recorded and it's on Facebook, and the recording will be available. So if any of you feel that your friends or family may want to see it, it'll be available on hindusforhumanrights.org. And thank you. Please take care. And we will let this echo chamber echo more and more as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Raju and Sunita.
Thank you. Nice meeting all of you. Let's continue the fight. Good night to all of you.
Good night.
Good night.
Hey Giri, all good?
Yes, I shall
Yeah.
go ahead and end the
Facebook Live and everything.
yeah.